pointing to. I'm the one that all, and what we're studying on Sunday mornings, all the writers that God used, all of the prophets and the Psalms and the writings of Moses are pointing to Jesus. And Jesus is saying, now this is coming about in your lifetime, and you're seeing it with your own eyes. He said, today this Scripture has been fulfilled in your hearing. And all were speaking well of him and wondering at the gracious words which were falling from his lips. And they were saying, is this not Joseph's son? And he said to them, no doubt you will quote the proverb to me, physician, heal yourself. Whatever we heard was done at Capernaum, do here in your hometown as well. They're saying, Jesus, start doing miracles here now. You know, we've heard about you doing them other places, and Jesus already knows this is where they're going. This is where they're going. And he cuts to the chase. He doesn't go through the process of just listening and the dialogue back and forth here. These are people that he's known all of his life. And he says, now you're going to be saying to me, all right, we want to see that here. You know, let us be the recipients of some of these signs and wonders that you're doing. He says, no doubt you will quote the proverb to me, physician, heal yourself. Whatever we heard was done at Capernaum, do here in your hometown as well. And he said, truly I say to you, no prophet is welcome in his hometown. But I say to you in truth that there were many widows in Israel in the days of Elijah, when the sky was shut up for 3 years and 6 months, when a great famine came over all the land, and yet Elijah was sent to none of them, but only to Zarephath in the land of Sidon, to a woman who was a widow. And there were many lepers in Israel in the time of Elisha the prophet, and none of them was cleansed, only Naaman of Syria. And God will say, Jesus will say, in one of the other gospel accounts, in the Gospel of Matthew, he's going to say, so Jesus refused to do many miracles in Nazareth because of their unbelief. Now, Jesus was filled with the Holy Spirit of God in a way that you and I will never experience. In a way that even the apostles of the Lord could never experience, because they were not the only begotten Son of God. But even Jesus, stay with me here, and we need to think together all through the lesson, not just at pieces of it, and not trip and fall over while it's going on. If I ever do that, it's okay if you laugh. It's okay if you laugh, and then come up and help me. Stay with me tonight. This is important, and this is something that I wrestle with and have for ever since I started in ministry. It's something that David Wallace does an amazing job with in helping people, but it's also something he wrestles with. And it's not new. In fact, I even wrote something in the bulletin, and I hadn't even talked to you about what you were feeling. I wrote something in the bulletin that is very similar to what Ben is expressing there. Jesus was perfect. As we mentioned this morning, there was no sin in him at all. There was no guile found in his mouth. There was not any ulterior motive. There was not any tit for tat. There's not any revenge. He's not going to get even. He doesn't do that. He doesn't do that. Never did. He's pure and holy and blameless and sinless, the Son of God. And he could judge a situation perfectly because he could look into someone's heart and he knew exactly what they were thinking. He knew exactly what their motives were. You and I don't. And that makes it difficult. I'm going to share with you some personal experiences. Let me tell you, to begin with, I don't have any greater ability to look into someone's life and to evaluate things than any of the rest of you do. So I'm not Superman, and I don't have all the answers. And if you didn't know that before, go ahead and write that down, and I'll say it again at some point. You can say, yes, he's admitted to that. Judy and I had been married about 1.5 years, and there was an orphan's home in Central Texas that needed help on weekends. They called us the Weekend Warriors, and we would come in and we would spend a long weekend in one of the cottages with these foster children and sometimes with orphan children there, and we would give the house parents that were there all the rest of the time a break for a weekend. And Judy and I said, hey, we can do that. You know, our families had both been involved in child care all of our life, and we had foster children in our home, and Judy had foster children in her home growing up, and we said, you know, this is going to be a natural. And so we said, just let us know when. And the congregation that I was preaching for in the town of Desdemona, that's not a disease, that's really a town. In the town of Desdemona, they supported very generously this children's home. And so they said, yes, that'd be great. And then you can just load up all the kids in one of the vans, and you can bring them here for Sunday whenever you're preaching that weekend. It'd be great. And we get to see all these kids. And so the first weekend Judy and I did that, we did it for the cottage that had 12 adolescent and toddler children. And the youngest was a 5-year-old boy. And we got there early that Friday afternoon so that house parents could leave and go on their weekend away. But we also wanted to talk to them about what we should expect, if there was any unique thing going on, or if a child had any medical issues that we need to watch for. And they said, you know, really, it's a delight. The only one that you'll need to watch is that 5-year-old. They said, because he is the biggest con that you'll ever meet. And said he is the cutest and the sweetest, and he knows that. And he will have you doing his bidding within 30 minutes of us leaving. And I'm going, oh no, not me. Not me. But he was good. He was good. And the thing is, you know, I look at that now and I'm going, had I been in his situation, I might have been exactly like him. I might have done everything just like he did. I've never been in that situation. So that's an experience, a life experience he was having at age 5 that me being 25 that I'd never really been through. And they said one thing he's going to do, and you'll have to put up guard bars to keep it from happening. He said he will be in the queen size bed with you and your wife before the night's over. Now I said, not happening. Not happening. And so everything went really good that Friday afternoon, that Friday evening, and I cooked out hamburgers for them. Everybody was happy, and we're getting them all to bed. And Judy is on one end of this big giant house, and it had a wing of bedrooms down this end for the girls, and a wing of bedrooms down this end for the boys. And so I'm in here getting the boys all bathed in their pajamas, and get them all in bed, and we've had our devotional, and we have our prayers, and I give them all a big hug and tuck them in, and I go back in. I'm going, boy, that was easy. And then in a few minutes, I start hearing a little whimper. And this little boy's crying. And so I go in there and I'm going, okay, now I got to show love, but I've got to be stern too. And so I go in there and I say, now, you know, I know that the couple that you're used to, they're not here. They call them mom and dad. And I said, but we're here and everything's going to be fine, and you need to stop crying. So he kind of sucked it up a little bit, and so I walked back in, and Judy said, so how did that go? And I said, I'm a master. You know, we're ready for children. And so, I mean, just a few minutes after that, we can hear him starting to whimper again. It's getting louder, and so he starts crying, and I go back in there, and this time I'm going to be really firm. And I said, now listen, if you don't stop crying, you know, that's not going to be a good thing. And what my daddy had always said, I'll give you something to cry about. Isn't that what they said back when we were little boys? If you're going to cry, I'll give you something to cry about. And he understood that, and so he sucked it all up again. And so I go back in, and Judy said, so how'd it go this time? Are you weakening? And I'm going, my resolve is just as strong as it was when we pulled in the driveway. And then he starts crying again. And I went in there and I spanked him. But that's back when you could spank. And I think the statute of limitations has expired on that offense. I was 25 and now I'm 65. 40 years ought to be enough. But if not, I'll be involved. You can still use me in the prison ministry. And so he finally sucked it. I stayed there and I hugged him after that. And I told him, I said, now we're not playing this game. And so I put him back down and he quit crying a little bit. And I go back to the bedroom and Judy said, so how did that go? And I said, well, it broke my heart. It just really, I didn't think something like that would affect me, but it really cut in deep, having to discipline. And he starts crying again. And I get up and I'm going, what do I do? And Judy said, maybe you should ask him why he's crying. Okay, it had never registered with me to do that. Us guys are dumb as a box of rocks. We need to admit that. And so I go back in there and I said, okay, I'm still being firm, and I'm not going to sit on the edge of the bed this time. And so I went in and I said, well, I need you to tell me something. He says, oh, okay. And I said, why are you crying? He said, well, when I was getting my pajamas out and I pulled the drawer, it came all the way out and it fell on my toe. And I said, what? And he said, yeah, the corner of the drawer hit my toe. And I look and his big toe is about the size of mine. And it's black and it's swelling. And all right, I felt like a worm. Less than a worm. I carried him back into our bedroom. I got a fingernail file and I filed through the nail to let the pressure off, and that helped. I got him some baby aspirin and he slept with us, and I felt guilty the whole weekend. And I still do. I've carried that guilt for 40 years and I've confessed it before, but it doesn't seem to go away. I thought I knew what was going on. But see, I'd been warned. And so my perception of that situation could not have been more wrong. We make mistakes. My intentions were very noble. Maybe a little bit arrogant too. But I was wrong. I didn't want to be wrong. And as long as we live in this life, we're going to keep making those kind of mistakes. It will happen. It's going to keep happening because you and I do not have the advantage that Jesus had, being perfectly the Son of God, being completely filled with the Holy Spirit of God, and being able to judge and know what people were even thinking. We're not there. And so as long as we live, whatever the circumstances, we need to try to identify with people to the very best of our ability. But there are circumstances in this life that many of us have never experienced. I have never had a bad marriage. I've had a fabulous marriage. I was brought up by two parents who loved me and would have given their life for me because they had already given their lives to the Lord, even though they were young. I don't know what it feels like to grow up outside of the church. My dad was a preacher all of his life, all of my life, from as far back as I can remember. I've had the advantage, and it is a blessing. I don't know why I had it and other people didn't. But even when I started preaching, if I had fallen, if I had just walked away and said no, there was a safety net under me, not just my dad, but there were preachers that loved my dad and were close to him, a lot of them around Abilene, and they would have been there to catch me. I would have never crashed. It's almost like Jesus, his foot wouldn't touch a stone. There's a safety net there. And if I was under attack spiritually, there were 10 or 12 different men who would have been at my house to check on me. I don't know what it feels like for some of our ministers, even some in Alaska, that don't have that. They don't have that. I don't know why I have been blessed that way. And now I've got brothers that if something happened, they'd come riding in and you'd think it was the Cartwrights that had shown up. Because we love each other and we're committed to each other. So there's some situations in life that I can try to understand, and some I can get real close to understanding, But there are a lot of situations in life that are really beyond me. Judy worked with the ladies in Africa. She did a fabulous job in working with the ladies. And that group grew, and she's teaching them how to support their families, even if they have no other source of income. She taught them how to sew with the old treadle sewing machines. And I tell you what, don't wrestle her today with ankles. Don't do an ankle wrestle, because her ankles are strong from teaching those women, pedaling on that treadle, getting that sewing machine to work. And I'll show you sometime. I'll wear one of the shirts one of the ladies made for me. I mean, they learned. They didn't just experience that time. And then Judy starts showing them how to bake. They knew how to cook things on an open fire, but not any of them knew about an oven. They had never had an oven. And so we got an old 55-gallon, not an old one, we bought a new 55-gallon barrel, and then we bought a 35-gallon barrel, and I had some welders put together some supports inside, and we could put that 35-gallon barrel inside the 55-gallon barrel, and we could put a fire underneath that, and so the smaller barrel wasn't burned up, and we covered it with mud. We covered it with mud, and it was a big earth oven. And we dug out underneath it after we had built it all, and so we could put wood underneath there, and Judy taught the women how to bake. She taught them how to make cakes. She taught them how to make rolls. And they would start cooking, and I tell you what, people would come from all over the neighborhood, all over that end of town going, what is that smell? That smell, it was the baking bread or a cake being made. And they would say, can I buy some? And the women are saying, this could be a source of income for our families. You know, we could build one of these out in the village where we live, and you know, we could make bread and sell bread. And so they start trying some of that. And one day they had sold about $3 worth of bread. I mean, as those rolls would come out of the oven, there was a line of people, and some of you guys are already drooling because you've already smelling it. And they would sell those quicker than they could take them out, and people were just going crazy. And they made about $3 one day. And Judy says, all right, now we need to reinvest that $3 and buy some more flour and some yeast and all these other ingredients. And they're all going, that's great, that's right. And Judy said, so who will keep up with the $3? And here's the sweetest lady in that ministry. She was so sweet. Her name was Joyce. A real tall woman. But she was so sweet. And she said, everybody's looking at Joyce. She was a natural leader. And they said, Joyce can keep the money until tomorrow because the shops were already closed. And Joyce said, I cannot take the money home. It would be too big a temptation if I took the money home because I know there's not much food at home. And when I hear my children crying because they're hungry tonight, the temptation, I believe, would be more than I could handle. I would use some of that money and buy some food to fill their bellies. When they told me that, I felt like I'd been run over by a truck. How could I work around this woman for a year and a half and not know that her family was hungry? How could I do that? Well, one reason is she covered it real well. She covered it real well. And when I talked to her about it, I said, Joyce, we'll take care of your children. And there never was a time when a need came up with a child that we ever refused. There were some older people that we said no to because there simply wasn't enough money. But we never said no to a child. And she said, there's people that have it a lot worse than I do. And I said, tell me about them. I wasn't ready to hear. I really wasn't ready to hear. You see, because I thought I was seeing everything. And I was totally blown away, not only by the honesty of this woman, but her commitment to God that I could not endure that temptation. So please don't ask me to do it. I struggled with that. I struggled with that more than any other thing while we were in Africa. Of how to help people that had a need. When I got off the airplane in Africa, I had more in my pocket than what they had in the entire world. Judy and I said, we're going to have an open home. We're not going to isolate ourselves in a compound. We're not going to put up a great big giant fence and have guards with weapons and that be our castle. So we're going to be open, and we were. So we got up the first morning there that we were in. We stayed at our son's house while we were working on a house, and we got it all fixed up, and we moved in. And I get up the first morning, and I walk into the kitchen, and there's people standing outside the kitchen window, just as quiet as a little mouse, waiting for us to get up. And here it is, 6 o'clock in the morning, and they're looking at me, and they say, "Good morning, Papa. We have a need." And I thought, well, I can't ignore it, because they're right here. And so then Judy and I talked about that, because we thought, well, it's the first day. Well, it just got worse. And so we said, all right, if we put up curtains, if they can't see us, then we can tiptoe into the kitchen, and we can get some water, and we can make our coffee, and at least get our day started. But they're still outside. And they speak through the curtain when they hear you turn the water on. And they don't know if it's me or Judy, so they say, "Good morning, Papa," or "Miss Papa," or "Sister Papa." I have a need. I could not go to the post office without at least 4 people, without at least 4 different people asking for assistance. Some of them were professional beggars. Some of them used that, and their status in life was equal to, financially was equal to ours. There was a man who had no legs, who rolled himself around wearing gloves on his hands, rolled himself around like on a big skateboard, everywhere, all over town. And he was great at begging. Every time I saw him, I didn't even stop and think about helping this man. I'm going, how in the world could I even identify with that, living without legs? And here the man comes up, and he's so nice. And so I would give him, whatever change I had in my pocket, or I'd give him a bill, and he would always be happy. He lived in a house better than mine. I offered once to buy him a bicycle that you pedal with your hands. I mean, you can sit up on the seat, and they made big cushion seats for people that had troubles like he did, and you could pedal it with your hands and steer at the same time, and it had a basket on it. And I said, "This has got to be better." I said, "We'll just go get you one today. I know the man who makes them." I said, "This got to be better than living down there and having your hands in the dirt all day." And he said, "I don't need one." And I said, "Well, it would be so much better." And he said, "I have 5. And I use them when me and my wife go out. But I don't need them during the day." See, this did it become his business. And so you see something like that, and I'm going, and all this time I've been contributing to his business. And I felt very personally about it. He's taken advantage of me. Maybe. But I can't let that feeling affect the way I deal with the next person. Are you with me there? I can't let the people. Jesus didn't let those that he fed the 5,000, and then the next day they're looking for him, and he starts teaching them, and they're saying what you're saying. This is in John 4, 5, and 6. And in John 6, Jesus said, "You haven't followed me because of the teaching. You followed me for the fish and the bread." Jesus said, "That's why you're following me. You didn't come to hear what they said. What you're saying is very hard." He's asking for a commitment. He's asking, do you believe that God is God? Do you believe that I am the Son of God? And they're going, this is a hard saying, we're not sure we understand. And Jesus said, you're not following me because of my teaching. You're following me because of the bread. And the Bible tells us that the multitude that they turned and followed him no more. Those people walked away. Because Jesus saw into their heart and he saw their motive. And it was only for the bread and the fish. They weren't coming for any other reason. And when I meet people like that, I cannot let that affect the way I feel about the next person I meet. But see, that's where the struggle is within me. Not them. Not them. Within me. Within me. The Lord said through the Apostle Paul to the church at Thessalonica, 2 Thessalonians chapter 3 and verse 10, he said, when I was with you, I gave you this order. In fact, the language of it is, he's saying, when I was with you personally, he was with them for about 18 months. He said, when I was with you, I kept giving this. It wasn't just, I gave you these instructions one time. He said, I kept reminding you of this. And it's very simple. He said, if a man does not work, he should not eat. And we know that one, and we're good at that. And that's true. It's true. But there are times when people are doing the very best that they can, and jobs are not as easy to find. And there are people that don't have all of the contacts that you and I have. If something happened to Judy and I, some of you would help us find a job real quick, and you'd say it's about time he learned to work. But we have lots of friends. But there are some people that it's really, really difficult. Circumstances in their life, circumstances in their background, habits that they have, addictions that they have. And so it's difficult, more difficult for them. I've never had that kind of addiction. So it's real easy for me to would be real easy for me to say, well, you just need to quit it. It's not always that easy. So it is true. If a man doesn't work, he shouldn't eat. But there's sometimes there are places and there are situations, circumstances where jobs just aren't available. So what do we do then? This weighed heavy on me. We had an older couple at church in Uganda. Really sweet couple. They had trouble with their kids. Their sons were dead. They had been killed in crime. Their daughter had a little baby boy. They didn't even know who the father was. And they came to church one Tuesday, came to the building one Tuesday and said, our daughter was killed in a car wreck last night. The little baby lived. Beautiful, beautiful little baby. About 6 months old. I mean, my heart just leapt for joy. And they said, would you take him and raise him? I said, I'll help you. We'll help you some. Culturally, and see that does, I know culture doesn't affect the truth of God. Culture affects people, and people live under the truth of God. Culturally, they didn't want the little boy. I didn't know that. I mean, that's their grandson. I had a little grandson right there in Africa with us. I had a grandson. They have their grandson, And so I tell one of our young men there that day, I gave him some money, and I said, go to the store and ask the pharmacist first before you go to the store. But go to the pharmacist and see if there's formula that we can get for this baby. And so he goes and he comes back with 2 cases of formula. And I said, here, this will help. You know, you can give this to the baby. And they're going, fine. You know, that's good. 3 days later, they come back with a little baby, and he's almost lethargic. You can tell that he's losing weight. You can tell that he's malnourished. I said, what's happening? The grandparents drank the formula. See, they didn't want the little boy. So we need to take the baby to the hospital. I sent one of our members with them to take the baby to the hospital. You have to pay the doctor in advance there. You have to buy the medicine and everything in advance there. The grandparents refused. They said, no, give us the money, and we'll buy the medicine. Give us the money, we'll pay the doctor. But you know where that's headed. To save the baby's life, I sent money to the grandparents. They didn't spend it on the baby. I finally asked some of our men to go to one of the judges there. And the police, along with that judge, came and looked into things, and they took the little baby away from the grandparents and put it in an orphanage about an hour away from where we lived. And when we left, the little boy was doing great. But see, I don't understand that kind of thinking. I just don't, my mind doesn't go there. And I don't think your mind would go there either. But if you see that, it can harden you. And you can say, well, why then should, maybe everybody's taking advantage of me. And one of the games, and it was a game, it was a word game. Someone would come in to see me, and they would say, I've got a bad toothache. And you could tell. I mean, their face is swollen. They hadn't stuffed cotton in there. It's swollen, and they said, I've got to have something done. And I'm going, okay. And they say, so it'll take 20,000 shillings. That's about $10. I mean, could you go to the dentist over here for $10 and him fix things for you? The first couple of times I'm going, $10? Man, that's a bargain. I found out that you could have it done for $2.50. But they would start out at $10 and hope that by the time, if I Jewed with them some, that, negotiation, we'd get down and they'd still get to have their mouth fixed. And if they got anything above that, well, then that was just an addition. And so they would leave and they'd be happy and they're laughing. And I thought they were rejoicing that they were going to get their tooth fixed, but they were rejoicing that they had just took me. And so it became a game. But you know what that does? That can make you become cynical. Dear God, don't let me become cynical. Don't let me think everything's a game. And what it can make you want to do, it can make you pull back and say, if that's what's going on, I'll just stop helping. No. If God had wanted us to see every situation perfectly, He would have given us all of the ability that Jesus had. But we cannot see every situation perfectly. And there are some people that will never ask, like Joyce. She would have never said anything because they realize that some people are worse off. And so we go merrily on our way and no one ever says anything, so we don't know. And we have people within the body of Christ that are really struggling, and we don't know it because they don't say anything and we don't ask. Or maybe when we do ask, we don't help. Oh, and then there's those that are in your face. There are those that are in your face like they were with Jesus. Jesus, he preempted them in Nazareth. He said, I know what you're going to do. You're going to say, physician, heal yourself. Now start doing the miracles here that you've done everywhere else, like in Capernaum. Do some of those here for us. We want to be the recipients of these things. There are people that come and they would say, you must help me. There were times I found out that we'd given Bibles to people and they'd sold them. It hurt. Most of the time, if they sold them, it was because they were starving. You understand a little bit then. Sometimes it was just for the money. And that's very aggravating. But let's remember about Jesus. Let's remember about Jesus. He went about doing good. He didn't heal everybody that had ever been sick. He didn't feed everybody that was ever been hungry. In fact, the two examples he gave out of the Old Testament, he said in the day of Elisha, he said, don't you think there were a whole lot of lepers, but only Naaman the leper was healed? And said whenever the famine came in the time of Elijah, said, don't you, for the 3.5 years when it didn't rain at all, said, don't you think there were more widows than that one Zarephath? But yet she's the only one that her meal never ran out. The oil never ran out as long as the famine lasted. She had food for her family. And what was the situation when Elijah met her? He said, go and make me a cake. Go and make me a little corn pancake. And she said, my intention was to make the last one. I've just got enough for one more, and make that, and me and my son, we're going to eat it because I'm a widow. We're going to eat it, and then that's it. We'll just lay down and die because there's no more. And he said, go make me one. And her oil didn't run out, and the meal didn't run out until the famine broke. And so God's, I don't know why. I don't know why she was the only one chosen. But that's not for me to answer. I have to answer for the situations that I find myself with. And sometimes they're hard. Sometimes they're hard. But what God expects of us, what He expects of us, is the best we can do. So don't harden your heart. Don't hide your money away. In whatever way you may have been hurt or seen or heard, don't stop. Don't stop. Jesus didn't. He didn't. He didn't stop until He got to the cross and then He laid down. I wasn't there, so I don't know. But in my mental picture, when Simon of Cyrene handed the cross to the soldiers, I don't think they had to wrestle Jesus. I mean, this was a death sentence, and He knew it. But they were professional executioners. They'd done this. I just cannot see Jesus resisting, because He laid down His life. He laid down on that cross, put His arms out. They didn't have to take His arm and stretch it out and force His hand open. He didn't stop. He didn't stop. And He still hadn't stopped. He ever lives to make intercession for us. As many little 5-year-old boys as I've misjudged, As many women who were hungry with their children that I didn't know about. Jesus still intercedes for me. Will I ever get it down perfectly? No. Nope, I'll just try to do better. And that's where we live. One of the marks of a disciple of Jesus is that he follows his master. So we go about doing good. If you're struggling with that, Jesus certainly understands, and he can help. If you're resisting going about doing good, the problem's not with the world, the problem's with your heart. And you know where the answer is. It's with Jesus. Whatever your needs may be, come right now while we stand and sing.